just wanted to take just a second and explain a little bit the background and the context of what's going on here. Jesus, when he was inviting them, when he was calling them, it says here, he called his 12 disciples to him. And then he gave them the authority to do all of those things. There was something that was going on here. Jesus knew and understood the future. He knew what was going to come. He knew what was going to happen. So in these particular verses, he's sending them out to the house of Israel because God wanted to reach out to Jewish people once again, give them another chance, you see. But Jesus is also warning them here about all kinds of troubles that they will face in front of them, just in a few short years. The planet, the known countries of the time were ruled by the Roman Empire. Roman Empire had a system of worship that was based on pagan gods. And they had their own temples. They had their own worship times. They would meet on the day of the sun, which was Sunday. This is why in most of Christianity today, people go to church on Sunday, not because something was changed in the Bible, but because in the Roman times, you would go to temple on the day of the sun, which was the first day of the week, Sunday, you see. And you would have to offer incense to a particular god. Usually the emperor of Rome was also the head of the church, of the religion. There was no separation of church and state. It was all one thing. So when Christianity was beginning to take root, and when Christians were going to go out there and start preaching, Jesus knew that they were going to face all kinds of opposition, trouble, persecution, and so on. And this is what Jesus was trying to prepare his disciples for. So when you look at these first 2 centuries of Christianity, you see the type of persecution that you have never seen since. I mean, you see people thrown to wild animals. I went and I looked up a little bit, did just a little research on some of the things that these emperors did to these people. And we don't have too many kids in here, so I'm not going to gross you out too much. But, they would take people, for example, and skin the animal, skin the cow, and they would put the person in there, and they would close it all up, and just so your arms were sticking out in your head, and then they throw that person to the wild animals. And they say that Emperor Nero would stand there, and he would just laugh as hard as he could as these Christian people were being torn to shreds by these animals. I mean, baking people, boiling people, nailing people to the crosses, drowning people, putting people in some kind of a syrup and then throwing them to the wild bees and wasps and ants. I mean, just as horrible thing as a human mind is capable of imagining, this is what they would do to Christians. And the reason was obvious, because the Christianity was beginning to challenge the established order. Christianity was beginning to tell these people, you don't need to go to the temple anymore, you don't need to give money to the temple. But, if you don't go to the temple, that meant you also did not support the government. You also did not support the emperor. So the emperors, when they saw, this was Diocletian here, a picture of him, you see. This guy was one of the most brutal people that you could see, that we know from the history how many people he killed. When they realized that they were threatened by Christianity, they just went all out in their attacks, in their murderous attacks against Christians. The next picture you'll see is Nero. Somebody made a statue of him, you see, and this is how he looked. I mean, these were violent people. Extremely violent people. So when Jesus was sending his disciples to go out there and to do this, He called to him his 12 disciples. He gave them authority over the unclean spirits to cast them out and to heal every disease and every affliction. And then in the next verse you saw the names of all of them, you see. And then Jesus sent them, go nowhere among the Gentiles, but go to the Jews, you see, and minister to them. Why? Because God wanted Jewish people to repent. He wanted them to accept Jesus. He wanted to give them another chance. So Jesus wanted his disciples to be ready for this. And he said to them, and proclaim as you go, saying, the kingdom of heaven is at hand. Heal the sick, raise the dead, cleanse lepers, cast out demons. You receive it without paying, give without pay. You see? So Jesus gave them a certain authority. Gave them certain powers. I don't have those powers today. I can't go clean the leper. By the way, on the next picture, we can put it up just for a few seconds. You know, this is how leprosy looks like. So leprosy is not this benign disease that we think, you know, when you read something in the Bible, it's one thing, and when you actually see the picture, then that's a completely another story. Then all of a sudden you realize when Jesus was healing these people, you realize what he was dealing with. You see? And then he says in verse 9, acquire no gold or silver or copper for your belts, no bag for your journey, or 2 tunics or sandals or a staff, for the laborer deserves his food. And here is a picture of the money that they would use, and they would take these little coins and they would stuff them in their belts when they were going on a travel trip somewhere, and that's how they supported themselves. Jesus says to his disciples, don't take any money with you. Go out there and your needs are going to be taken care of. You know, people are going to feed you and they'll give you a roof over your head. You know, on a side note, if you're watching TV and seeing these preachers who are constantly begging for money, have nothing to do with it. Because that's not what Jesus instructed the apostles to do. He says, you have received without pay and give freely. Gospel is not for sale. All of these guys out there are constantly begging for money and buying jets and all living in luxury, you know, that's not Christianity. That's something else, but it's not Christianity. I mean, people can follow it, but it's not Christianity. It's not Jesus. You see? So, Jesus is trying to teach these guys to go out there and to do the work that he needed them to do. As you enter the house, greet it. And if the house is worthy, let your peace come upon it. But if it is not worthy, let your peace return to you. And if they don't listen, if they don't receive from you, shake off the dust from your feet. In other words, our job is not to force somebody into the gospel and into following Jesus. Our job is simply to find people who are willing to absorb, to learn. If they're not, that's fine. You walk away. Right? We're not about forcing people to live any certain way of life. That's not what Jesus wanted them to do. He says, you leave that house, and truly I say to you, it will be more bearable on that day of judgment for the land of Sodom and Gomorrah than for that town. And the last slide we have is where they think that Sodom and Gomorrah was at the time. And there is nothing there now, you see. So Jesus here is sending his disciples. When it says that he called them, and when it says that he sent them out, he knew what was going to take place. He knew that they were going to be abused. He knew that they were going to be persecuted. He knew that they were going to be killed. Why? Because of Satan. Satan was there from the beginning. Lucifer, powerful angel in the hierarchy of angels. Extremely powerful. Until evil, sin was found in his heart. And then he decided to turn against God. And if you study the Bible carefully, you find out that the saints, the people who are saved, are actually going to be those who will sit at the judgment of Satan, you see. So Satan, from the early days, has been trying to derail the message of God, of the kingdom. He has gone against God's people. He has waged war on God's people. He even tried to dissuade Jesus Christ from going to the cross. That's how far he went. So at that time in the history, Satan used every tool that was available to him to stop the growth and the spread of Christianity. At that time, the tools were torture and murder. And the government figured out if they take a disciple of Jesus and torture them and skin them alive, I mean, there are literally drawings and pictures of this, what they did to people, you see, that they will make an example of them, and nobody else will then follow this crazy new faith, this crazy new religion. So Satan used the culture and the customs of the time to go against Christianity. And that was to tear people apart to pieces. So now we are thinking about us. We are living in the literally 21st century. Times have changed. People have become more civilized, right? People don't torture anybody anymore. They don't skin people alive. Not in this country. I mean, you have an occasional crazy person that commits murders, but as a society, we don't do that. And if somebody was doing that openly in the public, most of us would not go to watch that, like they did back in the old times. But today, Satan is using other methods to tear down the Christianity and to destroy those who follow Jesus and who want to follow that message. There is evolution. There is science. And science is a good thing, obviously. But it can also be used to point to the Christian and say, well, you're stupid. You believe in Jesus? You believe that Jesus is real? I mean, look at the science, what it all shows us. The planet has been here for billions of years. Evolution is how we got here. And Christianity today, because nothing has changed in 2,000 years, Satan, the primary agent against Christianity, he's still working today. He's still working today. Not only on the global level, but on the personal level. I believe that when we have problems and troubles and temptations and attacks in our own lives, I believe that Satan has something to do with it. Jesus is sending us out. In the next verse, after verse 15, in the verse 16, it says, Jesus told them, behold, I send you out as sheep in the midst of wolves. Therefore be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. A lamb is helpless. It doesn't have a big jaw. It doesn't have claws. It cannot defend itself. It is helpless. Anything out there can eat a sheep, a lamb, a wolf, a cougar, a lion, a bear, an alligator, I mean, you name it. Just about anything can attack a lamb and eat it, kill it, tear it apart and eat it. And Jesus, he's sending his disciples out there on the mission of their lives, and he says, I send you out there as sheep in the midst of wolves. Why didn't he say to them, I send you out as gladiators? I send you out with big tanks and machine guns and airplanes. I send you out powerful. I send you out. You remember when they said, when his disciples said to him that the fire from God would fall on those people? That's what they wanted. They wanted the power, right? And instead, Jesus says, no, I'm sending you out there as sheep. I'm sending you out there helpless. And there is a purpose for why Jesus is doing it that way. The purpose is, later on when we're going to look at it next week, you are going to be dragged in front of courts, in front of authorities, and he's going to give you a chance to do what? To testify. You know what the key here is? Jesus, it's a privilege to tell others about Jesus. But we don't do it because we want to do it. I don't talk to people about Jesus because that's my idea. If you're going to talk to people about Jesus, you got to do it because He is sending you to do that. You see, He is asking you to do that. I sent you out. We do not go out into the world to proclaim Jesus on our own authority. We go out because He sent us. So, Jesus says, behold, and this means stop. Think about this. I want you to understand this. Take a moment and think about this. And then He says, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go, therefore. You see, if you feel like you have the responsibility to tell somebody about the God's kingdom and the better way of life, then it needs to be because Jesus is sending you. He is giving you an order. He's giving you, at His direction is what we are doing. This is not our own thing. We did not invent this, Christianity, you and I. God did. He invented it. I mean, think about this. Look around and look at all of these people here, that we have. And this morning that came. I mean, these are the people here, I'm looking at you, that God is actually giving us the privilege. I mean, He chose you. 7 billion people on this planet. Today, right now, as we sit here in this church, there are millions of people in this city running around, going to flea markets and going to the malls and shopping and, just living the life. And here we are, sitting and reading the ancient book. Because God has chosen you to be His servant, to be His tool, to be His instrument, to be His messenger. And it's scary if you think about it, right? Because you can say now, oh my, that's a big responsibility. I don't know if I'm ready for that. I don't know if I really want to do that. People sometimes come to church because they think it's for them. Sometimes we go to church because we have something that we want to unburden. Sometimes we go to church because we have something that we want to give up. Sometimes we go to church because we want to heal something in here. A lot of times we go to church because we want something fixed in us, in our own life. And that's all legitimate, but it also helps us to forget that maybe you came to church for that reason, but God is also sending you. God is saying, I'm going to work on you, but you also need to share. You also need to go out there, not as a warrior, not as a gladiator, but as a lamb, wise as a serpent. If you live in Colorado, you know about snakes, right? Snakes, when you approach them, or when they see you coming, what do? Do they stand and fight? They take off. They disappear. Now, if you corner one, you better be careful. But they are smart. They see a dog, they see a cat, they see a human being, they see anything. They just slither away. They don't want a confrontation. Jesus says, be smart as a serpent, as a snake. How many less problems we would have in our society if we lived that way? You know, you go on YouTube and you see these crazy videos. I saw one where these two people were on the highway and somebody had a problem with somebody and they slammed on the brakes, you know, in front of this car, and then they came out of the car all, you know, wanting to fight. And pretty soon you have the adults rolling around on the ground while the cameras from every other direction is recording this. Not little kids. I mean, you're talking about 50-year-old people. Because they couldn't just be smart and just drive away. They had to have a confrontation. So Jesus is saying, don't have confrontation. If they want to hear you, great. If they don't want to hear you, walk away. You see? Be smart as a serpent. Be harmless as a dove. You don't want to hurt nobody. So Jesus is sending us out. And we need to understand that we have to go out there because of that fact. And we also have to understand, beware of men, for they will deliver you up to councils and scourge you in their synagogues. Jews, they could not kill disciples. They could only beat them. They killed some, but that was illegal. So the original disciples, they did not have nearly as much trouble as the next generation of Christians that attempted to take the Christianity into the Roman world. Because Romans, they could do whatever they wanted to do. They could skin you alive. They could cut your head 10 times if they wanted to. I mean, they would be, I don't want to say it, there is kids here. But anyways, you can do your own research on what they could do to you, you see. And this is what these people were going into. So when Jesus was calling them and saying, hey, I have this authority to give you to go out there, he knew what was going to be happening to them. He knew the trouble that they were going to go into. And he knows about you and me too. You know, right now we are not living in a same type of a police society that the Roman government had. They had a real police state. You couldn't do nothing without the authorities knowing. Now we in this country are getting there. We're going to be the same way, you know. The movement throughout the world now is, it used to be a conspiracy theory, this idea on total population control. But that's actually a reality. In China, they have cameras everywhere. In your apartment, I mean, they have cameras everywhere. There was a TV crew, American TV crew, that went to China, to a small city of 15 million people, because that's a small city over there, you know. And they went to a police department and said, we're going to send one of our people out there into the city. You give us an hour head start, and then you see how fast you can find them. So they took a Chinese person that looked like anybody else in the city, and they gave them a 1 hour head start, and then after an hour, the people at the headquarters in the police station, they turned on their cameras, they have face recognition, everything. Less than 5 minutes they found this person, where they were. You think this is not coming to the United States? It's coming. It's coming to Europe, it's coming everywhere. So, Satan is using the tools of the society and the tools and the customs that he can use to suppress the gospel. Right now in America, it's materialism. We go out there and make as much money as we can, and it is being overwhelmed with problems of life. I look around this room and I think this is the number one problem that we have as a church, as individuals in this room. Because as I look around into your faces and I know your stories, I see very few people in here that are not overwhelmed with troubles of just living a life. Making enough money, paying all of the bills, you know, just issues and troubles. I don't even want to talk about, you know, when other stuff happens, such as an illness. But just to survive nowadays, we are overwhelmed. We can't think straight anymore. I meet people and they tell me, Gordon, I can't even think straight anymore. Who told me? There was a guy here this morning at the service, David. And we chatted just for a second. And I says, how's it going? And he says, I'm tired. I said, what's going on? He said, I worked 12 days straight. They had me working 12 days straight without a break. You see, how are you gonna function? How are you gonna be a normal human being? So you have that, you have the entertainment, you have the politics, you have the sports, you have the constant struggle, you have the wife and the husband, and you have all of those issues, you see, in your life. How can you even think about Jesus? How can you even think about witnessing? How can you even think about sharing your faith? But he says, when Jesus was sending them, he was sending us out, sending them and now sending us out as sheep amongst wolves into a violent situation, into a tornado, into a hurricane. That's what he was sending them into. And they were prepared because they saw Jesus walk on water, and they saw Jesus calm down the tornado, and they saw Jesus raise the dead, and they believed. Look at the time that they spent with Jesus, 24/7 for 3.5 years. How much time do we spend with Jesus? How much time did we spend with Jesus last week? Everybody needs to answer that question. We have time for other things. We're working 12 days straight. But how much time are we spending with the Lord? I need to look at that myself. And I'm preaching and studying the Bible and preparing and visiting people and doing services, and I still don't spend enough time with Jesus as much as I should. There is no limit on how much time we should spend with God, connecting to God, you see. What he sends us out as, you see, he sends us out as sheep in the midst of the wolves. And not just in the vicinity of the wolves. Not just somewhere where the wolves may be, but into the midst. You know, wolves, if you follow wolves through the woods, you'll find out that they run in packs. Sometimes the pack can be between 30 and 50 wolves. And God help you if you go into a part of the mountain where they live. You see, where they have settled down and where they raise their young and where they, do everything, the colony of wolves. You find yourselves in the midst of that, you're in trouble. You better find the nearest tree and climb quickly. You see, and Jesus says, that's where I send you as sheep amongst the wolves. In other words, this world is out to tear you into pieces. Maybe you say, well, it's not so bad. I mean, people are nice, and I talk to them, and I pray for them, and I give them Bible studies. You need to remember that behind all of this, the power that was there 2,000 years ago, Lucifer, the powerful angel, he's still around. He's still around. Same goals. Stop people from turning their lives over to Jesus. Same goal. So if you go out there and if you try to witness for Jesus, you are going to be attacked. So on top of all of that, you see, you have this whole issue of the world against you. Well, on top of all of that, you have to worry about one more other thing. And that's our own propensity for sin. And our own inability to give ourselves over to the Lord completely. And yeah, we follow. A lot of people follow, but not all the way. A lot of people follow, but they still cherish something that they shouldn't be cherishing. They're still dragging around some baggage that they should have left at a station a long time ago. They still have this heavy backpack on their back because they can't give it up. It's been in the family forever. They can't give it up. And Jesus, when you look at these words, he says, take nothing with you. No money belt, no extra food, no extra shoes. In other words, he's saying to them, leave. To me, this is symbolic. Leave all of the baggage behind. If you got sin in your life, go down on your knees and pray to God day after day until it's gone. Until he takes it away. This is how serious we should be about following Jesus. This is how serious we should be. We cannot take this lightly. I said yesterday at the funeral memorial service for Janetta, and Sandy and Michelle are here. Their mom and grandma died. And I said, Jesus, when he comes, Johnny Cash says 100 million angels singing. It might be 100 billion. We're talking about serious business. And God has chosen us. Everybody that's here in this room today, God's chosen us to be his spokespeople. Are you kidding me? I'm not good enough to do that. I got too much junk in my own life. How am I going to be a spokesman for Jesus? How am I going to handle that kind of pressure? Yet he's pointing at you and I, and Sabbath after Sabbath, and saying, you're mine. You belong to me. So, what he commands us to be wise as serpents and harmless as doves. Be sharp-minded, be thoughtful, be shrewd, be wise, be cunning, be cautious. But also be harmless, be innocent, be loving. In other words, do not desire harm for anybody. Do not cause harm to anybody. Do not think harmful things to anybody and for anybody. Be like Jesus was. He's sending you. And the key to me in all of this is, and we're going to look at this more next week, if you acknowledge Jesus now, he's going to acknowledge you. When everything is said and done, when those who can kill body are done killing, when those who can torture are done torturing, when everything is finished, then the heavens are going to open. Jesus is going to show up with his crew. And those who have recognized him on this earth, he's going to recognize in front of God Almighty. That's how it's going to play out. And that's why those disciples sacrificed their physical lives. That's why. Because for them, Jesus was God, real. So, I hope this, what I said and what I shared in what I read gives us all something to think about. Gives us all a new perspective on our role as Christians. And gives us also a new attention to our own spiritual state. And you know, I said it from the beginning of the year, I want us, those of us who are here in this church, I want us to spiritually grow. I don't care if we have 500 in attendance or 50. I don't care if we have 5 in attendance. But I want us to spiritually grow. Grow closer to God. That's what we are called to. So God bless you. I will be here next Sabbath preaching again. But I'm traveling tomorrow, so pray for me. Going to Chicago to see my sick uncle. I'll be there 2 or 3 days and come right back. So thank you for being here, and I hope I see you again next week. Amen.